Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Dear Nigerians. You are listening to the first episode, or I should say, one of the first episodes of the Dear Nigerians podcast. Congratulations to you. You found me, you found it, you found us. Now, here we go. Let's have Dear Nigerians. My name is Aramide. My name is Aramide Kende. I'll say my full name. I am your wonderful host of Dear Nigerians. I am a storyteller. I'm a creative. I'm a technologist. I work every day with artificial intelligence. I try to build it and build with it and learn from it and learn with it. And I might share a little bit of that over the course of these episodes of Dear Nigerians. I am also a wife. I am a mommy. And as it relates to Dear Nigerians, I am your resident Nigerian American. That's all I'm going to tell you about myself for now. I really did think long and hard as to how I want to start these episodes of Dear Nigerians. I thought to myself, do I want to introduce myself and say, hello, everybody, this is Rocky Candy. I'll tell you a little bit about Rocky Candy. She's talking to. Do I want to do that? Do I want to introduce myself politely and then explain this and then introduce the episodes? And I really thought about it and I thought, you know what, Aramide, go with your personality. My personality is to give you the juice first. I'm going to give you the juice and I'm going to let you taste the juice. I'm not going to explain anything about who I am or why the juice or whatever. I just want you to see, what is this thing called Dear Nigerians about? And you tell me, do you like the juice? Does it make you dance? Does it taste good? If it does, hang on and we'll meet each other officially at some point. So some point later, I will introduce myself officially and let you learn about me. Welcome to Dear Nigerians. This is our place. This is our space for listening, for learning, for laughing with ourselves, for laughing at ourselves, for sighing, for changing our minds, for being more hopeful, for just being. I got to be honest with you that I think if I'm doing Dear Nigerians right, if I'm doing this well, Dear Nigerians is a space for us to question the things that we've been given that we don't dare question. That's what I want to do with Dear Nigerians. And if I'm doing this well, that's what you would say, this is what Dear Nigerians is. So if that's you and you have that Nigerian influence identity, welcome. Welcome to the space. Get comfortable. I'm opening up my living room to you, my digital living room to you. Take your shoes off, rub your feet against my soft carpet, get comfortable, get on the sofa, have a drink, and let's chat. Welcome. Now, if you're not Nigerian, but you are curious about Nigerians, maybe you have a Nigerian friend or a Nigerian boss or a Nigerian romantic interest, and you're just trying to figure these Nigerian people out. You care enough for them that you want to figure them out and understand them a little bit more. This place is for you too. I think that from an outsider's perspective, and this is my thought process based on what I've heard others who are not Nigerians say about Nigerians. I think from an outsider's perspective, Nigerians are a very interesting, intriguing people. In some cases, we're interesting, we're intriguing, we're impressive. But in other cases, we can also be a very frustrating conundrum, a very frustrating puzzle to figure out by nature of the fact that we have all kinds of strong cultures, strong perspectives, and an outsider might find that quite frustrating and hard to figure out. But if you're an outsider, I don't want to call you an outsider. If you are someone who might say, I am not someone of a Nigerian influenced background, but I do have Nigerians in my life, and I do want to learn a little bit more about you guys, welcome. This place is for you too. You are an honorary Nigerian, I guess. Welcome. This episode of Dear Nigerians is dedicated to a conversation about generations. Dear Nigerians, the generations are at odds. If you need a topic, Dear Nigerians, the generations are at odds. Now, I'm a nerd. I literally read things sometimes with a dictionary. And when that topic came to mind, I asked myself, what does it mean to be at odds? And to be at odds really means to be in a state of disagreement. Then I asked another question. What does it mean to disagree? To disagree means you are in contention with someone else. You are divided. Gosh, how about starting on a positive note every day? I'm sorry, guys. But it's the truth. I thought long and hard, like, what's the first episode? What do we talk about? And I just kept hearing this phrase in my heart: the generations are at odds. The generations are at odds. So I'm addressing our Dear Nigerians. Dear Nigerians, the generations are at odds. What we're discovering in this episode, for those of a Nigerian influence identity, for those who love those of a Nigerian influence identity, what are the expectations that generations have of each other? If we think traditionally, Now, we also want to discover, do our upheld traditions on this topic still stand in 2024 and beyond? How should those values change, if they need to change, and when should those values change? Whatever uh, the traditions are, where the generations are concerned. This is a hard conversation to have. You see, when you talk about generations, what ultimately happens is you think about it as human beings, as older versus younger generation. You know, it's really hard as well for people to situate themselves in a conversation like this, because they're wondering, well, am I the younger generation or am I the older generation? Right? Because there's some people who feel grown and sexy, and yeah, I'm the older generation, but nah, you still have things to learn. There's some people who are truly in the older generation, but they feel young. I personally don't want to put a line in the sand to say, okay, if you're past this line, you're older generation. If you haven't reached this line, you're younger generation. But for the sake of helping people situate themselves in this conversation, I'm going to put a line in the sand, and I'm going to say, if you are 55 plus, age 55 plus, I'm going to place you, for the sake of this conversation, in the older generation. And if you are 54 and under, right, we're putting a line in the sand, right? Lines in the sand sometimes fall in uncomfortable places, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. If you're 54 and under, you are younger generation. Now, I'll just explain personally. I, Aramide Kennedy, I don't think 55 is an old age. If you're 55, I do not think you're old. However, I am placing the line in the sand at 55 because at 55, for me, in my mind, is a reliable age of maturity. There are some things, some stupidities, some mistakes, some follies that might still be in a 40-something-year-old's mind, in a 30-something-year-old's mind, certainly in a 20-something and younger-year-old's mind, that by the time you are 55, we expect those things to be, quite frankly, chafed away, okay? So I'm going to put the line there and say, for the sake of this conversation, if you're trying to orient yourself, line in the sand, 54 and under, younger generation, 55 and older, older generation. All right, to orient this conversation, I also want to establish a baseline and decide, what are traditional values and roles that the generations play in Nigerian society? Keep in mind, Nigerian society could be Nigerians in Nigeria, or it could be Nigerians outside of Nigeria. It could even be Nigerians online on a group chat, okay? Nigerian society, think about it richly, and it's much richer than some fine boxes, okay? I asked artificial intelligence, and I asked the question, describe for me traditionally the roles that older and younger generations of Nigerians play. Now, here's why I trust AI to answer that question, okay? I simply wanted a statement of fact. I didn't want an answer that was based on someone's personal experience. Didn't want an answer that was based on someone's subjective views. I just wanted mere statement of facts. And I can trust artificial intelligence to do that because it's been trained on a lot of our literature. So from our literature, it can say, well, based on reading your constitutions and your novels and XYZ, these are the roles that the elders and the younger generation typically play in Nigerian society. So this is artificial intelligence's answer. All right, here we go. It says, in traditional Nigerian society, the roles of the old and young are clearly defined and rooted in cultural norms and values. These are the roles of the elder generation. The first, the elder generations are traditionally seen as custodians of culture and tradition. What does that mean? They're seen as those who preserve heritage. They're responsible for preserving and passing down cultural traditions, stories, folklore, customs. They ensure that the younger generation remains connected to their cultural roots. Also, in being a custodian of culture and tradition, the older generation is also traditionally the ones that are expected to conduct rites and ceremonies. Elders often oversee and conduct important cultural and religious ceremonies such as weddings, naming ceremonies, and funerals. Think back to your life. Is this true? For me, yes, in many ways. Okay, that's one. Custodians of culture and tradition. Here's the next role. The elders are also seen as advisors and mediators. They provide guidance. They offer wisdom and advice on many aspects of life, including marriage, parenting, conflict resolution, and community matters. Their guidance is highly valued and respected. Now, as advisors and mediators, they're also ones who mediate disputes. Elders act as mediators in family and community issues, using their experience and their authority to resolve conflicts and maintain harmony. All right. Also, they are moral and ethical role models. They set the example. They are meant to exemplify moral and ethical behavior, serving as role models for the younger generation. They're also meant to help reinforce social norms and expectations. Stop there, take a breath, take it in a little bit. These are traditional roles of the older generations in any Nigerian society. Elders are also heads of families and communities. In Nigerian cultures and communities, the older generation are ones who are entrusted with leadership. In many Nigerian communities, elders hold positions of leadership such as village heads, chiefs, or family patriarchs. They are also ones with decision-making authority. Elders are often the final decision makers in matters concerning the family and community, and their authority is respected and rarely questioned. Last role that elders play is to be mentors and educators. They're meant to, traditionally, the older generation are meant to be the ones who teach practical skills, so actual skills, okay? Such as in traditional Nigerian society, the farming, cooking, craftsmanship, and traditional arts. As mentors and educators, they're also the ones who are responsible for the moral education of our society. Through storytelling and direct instruction, elders impart moral values and life lessons to the young, helping to shape character and our worldview. That's that. Now let's go into roles of the younger generation. This is the first role based on looking at our constitution, our conversations, our online inputs in the internet, our literature. This is the first role that artificial intelligence pulls up as the roles of the younger generation. Role number 1, showing respect and obedience. Young people are meant and expected to show respect to their elders through polite behavior, language, and gestures. This includes traditional greetings, listening attentively, and not interrupting the elders. Young people are meant to be also in the role of showing respect. You're meant to be obedient. You're expected to obey the instructions and advice of elders, recognizing their wisdom and authority. Role number 1, younger generation, is to be respectful and obedient, according to artificial intelligence. That's very interesting. Number 2, younger generation traditionally in Nigerian cultures and society, they care and support for the elders. They provide physical care. They take on the responsibility of caring for the elderly family members, including helping with daily tasks, providing medical care, and ensuring their well-being. Also, in the role of providing care and support for elders, they are meant to provide financial support. Younger family members are often providing financial support to their elders, contributing to household expenses, and ensuring the elders' needs are met. Okay? That's care and support for the elders. All right. The other role for younger generation is to learn and preserve culture. Young people are expected to participate in cultural practices, learning from the elders and helping to preserve those traditions. They are responsible for learning and eventually inheriting the cultural knowledge and practices passed down by the older generation. I'm trying to go through this quickly so you don't snooze off, but I do think all of this stuff is important. So I'm going to keep going. Another role for the younger generation is to fulfill family roles and responsibilities, right? You are, as a younger generation, traditionally, you're meant to support the family livelihoods. Young people contribute to the family's economic activities, if it's farming, trading, or other forms of work. Of course, you would have interesting responses to this because most of us are not in a farming culture anymore, but that's okay. Young people are also expected to be ambassadors of tradition in traditional Nigerian society. When young people move to urban areas or when they go abroad, they're expected to represent their family and their community's values and traditions by maintaining a good image. Very interesting feedback. And here's the last one. As part of being a younger generation, you are expected to bridge generational gaps. The younger generation will often serve as a bridge between traditional values and modern influences, which helps to integrate new ideas with respect to cultural heritage and while respecting cultural heritage. All right. So there are some clearly defined roles that, based on our literature, our conversations, we can pull out as far as these are our traditional values in terms of how the generations are supposed to interact to each other. Now, if I had a live studio audience here, I would stop and I would say, okay, what do you guys think? I don't have that audience, live studio audience, but I gotta be honest with you. My first responses to all of this, first of all, is that it's true. If I'm to think of my 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 own experiences, right? Again, one person, but I'm willing to argue that multiple people have this experience. So if I'm to think of my experience, especially when I was in Nigeria, and especially when I came to the US and was going to environments that were primarily filled with Nigerian people, yeah, the role of the elders, as described by this output from artificial intelligence, is exactly that. And the role of the youngers is exactly that. The funny thing about it, though, is I just found it's interesting that a role for a younger person is to be quiet and be obedient. Wow. You are meant to, that's it. You are seen in Nigerian community as a well-functioning younger person if you're respectful and obedient. And I think that's where I start to peel apart at the layers a bit. And while I think respect and obedience in and of themselves are valuable things, I think for 2024, we might have some interesting opinions about that. We'll discover those later. That was my initial opinion. And if I think about it as a whole, I think if I look at what is expected of the older generation, everything I've said, it's actually quite honorable, the role that someone in an older generation is meant to play. You are responsible for passing down things that have been um, um, things that have been cultivated through generations. I want to say that in this world, especially in diaspora world, it's really easy to take that for granted because I do think there are a lot of people in diaspora that actually are not too aware of the value of what it means to be Nigerian or what it means to be Yoruba or Igbo. They're not too aware of the value of, like, the language, or the creation, the ingenuity of creating with little, creating big things with little things. They're not, I would say we, because I'm not being judgmental, sometimes we are not too aware of even the skill sets, like the farming skill sets, or and the intimacy you have with your soil to be able to plant certain seeds and get a harvest. We're not too familiar with that, or even familiar with the artistry of our outfits, our adire, all that stuff. But to be an elder who passes those things down, that's an honorable thing. To be an elder who mediates issues, that's an honorable thing. I have seen elders who do that, and it's messy work, especially in 2024. I've seen of some elders who do that. It's messy work, and you have to be someone as an elder who takes that as a responsibility, and you do that for your community and for your culture. And that's beautiful. What I also found interesting about that is that in some ways, and then again, this is me, my personality, the role of the younger generation, in some ways, not all, but in some ways, in that description, it sounds like there's a design box and mold that you're meant to fit into. And that, for me, there's good things about that and there's not so amazing things about that. I got to be honest with you. You're supposed to be respectful and quiet and not question things. You're supposed to be obedient. You're a well-functioning member of Nigerian society if you're obedient, traditionally. I guess some people might be saying, yeah, this is the young folks talking. There she goes, young folks. There they come with their disrespect. I assure you, I'm not one who thinks elders should be disrespected. But I do find some of the things, things that are traditionally, I do find some of the things that are traditionally expected of the younger generation a bit challenging. I guess in my conversation, I'll share a little bit of why that is. All right. Okay, that's artificial intelligence talking. I wanted to bring real lived experience to this conversation. And I went about and I asked multiple people. I picked up my phone and I texted people. And I asked two questions depending on how I class people. I asked people who were in the younger generation. I said, What is your perspective of the older generations of Nigerians? Or how do you view the older generation of Nigerians? And then I asked older people or people who are in the older generation, excuse my French, and I said, what do you think about the younger generation? How do you view the younger generation? And I thought some answers were very interesting. These answers might actually leave us talking for a while about this topic, but I'm going to share some of that. I asked some people, I even went online, okay, and I asked anonymously in different threads. And the reason I did this is that I wanted multiple people because we all come into a conversation with our own circle and our own frame of thinking, and each of us have our blinders. I wanted to ask multiple people these questions and get their feedback. I'm gonna share some of those responses, and I'm gonna start with the responses of the younger generation to the question, what do you think about the older generation of Nigeria? Here we go. Response number one. I see members of the Nigerian older generation doing some really impactful things. I actually think our generation, younger generation, is missing out on them because we don't speak to them enough. Okay, response number two. There is a big mentality of respect your elders in Nigerian society. While it's good practice in general, a lot of older people use this as an excuse to treat younger family members badly and disrespectfully because they, i.e., the younger family members, they dare not say anything negative. This is something that really annoys me. All right. Response number three, their speech, i.e., older generation speech. Their speech is honest and direct. Unlike Americans, this is a person who's in America, they don't beat around the bush. They don't attempt to cater to your feelings. No forcing people to read between the lines. They state exactly what they think bluntly. I actually find it refreshing. All right. Next response. Some are cool, i.e., some members of the older generation of Nigeria. Some are cool, and I want to hear their stories, while others are terrible to interact with, like very entitled, very mean, lacking any sort of grace. I think a lot of them carry shame and guilt and project that onto others. This is a response that made me stop and think, guys, and I'll tell you a little bit why later. All right, next response. They, the older generation, have a lot of wisdom and knowledge to share. They share their experiences so that we as Nigerian millennials can learn from it. Spiritually, they have valuable insights. In the context of marriage, their wisdom also applies. And also in the context of career. I notice that the older generations of Nigerians are deeply rooted in the word of the Lord, which works generations after generation. So this is someone coming from a Christian background. All right, next response. Older Nigerians amuse me. I've never seen a more disrespectful set of people who harp on and are so obsessed with respect, yet treat people younger than they are, or in a lower social class than they are, with disdain. All right. This is the next and last response, but it's a three-part response. So I placed it last because it comes from multiple perspectives. This is a member of the younger generation, again, speaking about how they view the older generation. Here's the first part of this response. They have lived in a certain culture for so long that sometimes they aren't as pliable to new ways of thinking, except a few open-minded ones. That's part one. Part two. There's a lot of culture and warfare entailed in their religion and ways of worship, hence less focus on the actual gospel of Christ, i.e. for those who are Christian or claim to be Christian, and more emphasis on human experiences, portals, and spooky orchestrations. I love this answer. Okay, this answer is from one of my dear friends, and I love it. And I'll tell you why later. Let's just keep going with the responses. Last part of this answer. They carry a lot of blessings that we, i.e., younger generation, would have to submit to in order to access them, irrespective of the huge variances in our opinions. So help us God. All right. Those are some of the responses from the younger generation on how they view the older generation. So essentially, if you're a member of the older generation, this is how, in some way, this is a representation, let me say, of how the younger generation views the older generation. And like I said, I wanted a bunch of responses from people because I wanted a little diversity. Now, here's my take on this. I put all these responses and I selected them and I read them out word for word in this specific episode because I think in some way, shape, or form, whether they are complimentary or not so complimentary, I think they're all legitimate. I'm going to summarize everything, okay? If I take all of these inputs and I summarize it, I would say this, that from these inputs, it is clear that the younger generation actually does see the older generation as people who carry valuable things for society, for them specifically and for society. I can see notes of that in all of these responses. At the same time, I see a younger generation that even though it sees value in the older generation, the way that the older generation perhaps communicates with them, carries themselves, enforces their beliefs, is not very palatable for the younger generation, is not very attractive for the younger generation. And so there is this slight, if not aggressive, divide. There's some responses here that I actually want to drill down into a little bit. This response that says, some are cool, I want to hear their stories, while others are terrible to interact with, very entitled, very mean, lacking any sort of grace. And this is the one I wanted to. I think a lot of them carry shame and guilt and project that onto others. Okay. I love this response, even though for someone in the older generation and maybe even the younger generation, they may feel this is too harsh. I love this response because, like I said, I think everything here is legitimate, but I love this response because it points a little bit into mental health of the older generation. And this topic is not, this episode is not dedicated to mental health. But when it comes to this topic, as far as like my relationships with the older generation, I'm privileged in the sense that the members of the older generation that I have access to, the members of the older generation that have allowed me to push and press into them, into their lives, and have poured into me, they are really upstanding individuals. And I can literally say, I can look back in my life at the areas of my life where maybe there was a fork in the road, where I had to make a decision, the areas in my life where I was about to make a poor decision for my life, the areas in my life where I was about to lean into folly as opposed to wisdom, the areas in my life where I was too weak to stand by myself. There has always, look, I'm a woman of faith and I believe in God, and I pour into my faith when these things come up. But in all those areas, there has always been a member of the older generation that's either through their words or their actions or their prayers, they've held me down. Okay. So I'm so privileged in that sense in terms of my relationship to the older generation. If I go back to that response though, especially the statement that a lot of them carry shame and guilt and project that onto others, I have to say, if I look at my relationships and my interactions, maybe not relationships, with some members of the older generations, I have been in rooms where I hear the old members of the older generation say things. I see members of the Nigerian older generation say things. And in my mind, I'm just like, there is no way you can say that or do that if you are mentally healthy. There's no way. Even if this response sounds harsh, I think there is some legitimacy to it. And if you're listening and you're part of the older generation and you're a little turned off, please don't be. Please open your ears and just hear earnestly from the younger generation that this is what they're feeling from you. Here's another response that I want to respond to. There's a lot of culture and warfare entailed in their religions and ways of worship, and there's more emphasis on the actual gospel if we're Christians, and more emphasis on human experiences, portals, spooky. I love his response, and spooky orchestration. I'm going to read that again without laughing. I love this response. More emphasis on human experiences, portals, and spooky orchestrations. All right. Again, a response that I think is legitimate. And again, older generation, if you're hearing this and you feel it's a little too harsh, you think it's a little too taunting, please don't shut off. Open your ears and listen earnestly. This is how the younger generation is viewing it. I love this response because it actually points to our cultural heritage. And I'm not going to go into it, but if you are African, not even just if you're Nigerian, if you're African, you know your ancestors have engaged in some dark things, okay? Some magic arts. Let's just be honest about it. I didn't want this episode to go there, but it's going there. And you see remnants of that from generation to generation being passed down. And right now in 2024, as millennials and Gen Z, they're trying to live life in modern society. We're still having remnants of that. And the people that we're looking at or meant to be looking at as people who are upstanding, as people who are the ones who are supposed to pass down to us the religious rights. And we're looking at that and seeing them more focused on actual things with power, actual things with power to give results. We're running into members of the older generation that are more focused on theories from human experiences, portals, and truly spooky orchestrations. And, that has to be questioned. That's my take on this thing. That's my take on this topic as far as traditional expectations of the older generation. But as I said before, and I want to kind of sum this up, I will never be someone ever, by virtue of the way I was raised, quite all right, but also by virtue of my experience and the members of the older generation that I've interacted with, and members of the older generation that have given me their wisdom. I will never be the person to say the older generation is amiss or the older generation has no value. I love the comment that said that they see the older generation doing really powerful things, and in some ways, the younger generation are missing out on them. I will never be that person that says the older generation is amiss or they don't have something to pass on, or they're so out of touch with this world. Let's get rid of them. I am not that person. I think the older generation should be honored. It's just good practice. They should be honored. And that's a little bit of passing of maintaining rather the culture that we've been given, the practices and the traditions we've been given of respecting your elders. I do think, however, based on my experiences, my experience in my young 30 something years of life, I do think that we do need to look at the things that have been passed down from the older generation. I do think we need to look at the standards that have been passed down from the older generation and be a people, we, younger generation, right? We need to be a set of people that respect it and value it, but are willing to adjust and modify it based on the situation. Because there are many situations that are not black and white. What do I mean by that? I'm going to give you a story. This is a real life story. This is my tailblazer. I want to start some episode of conversation with a real, true life, meaningful story that relates to the conversation. And I'm going to call this story, the name of this story is A Very Frivolous Story. That's the name of this story. I call it a frivolous story because truly the subject matter is very frivolous. The subject matter is about tying gele. Very, very frivolous. However, this situation in this story is extremely meaningful. And it's meaningful as it relates to this conversation about how the older generation and the younger generation of Nigerians interact. And it's also meaningful as far as the implications of who we are from now and beyond. All right, here we go. A very frivolous story. Story. Once upon a time. If you know what I'm doing. A couple years back, I went to a party with my husband. This was a couple years back. I was probably around 26, 27. And we went to your typical Nigerian Owambe party. For those who don't know what an Owambe party means, or you've never been to a Nigerian party, or you don't know what an Owambe is, let me first explain Owambe. Owambe is Yoruba for literally, it's in there. It means it is there. And that's how we describe our parties. It is there. What is there? Everything. Delicacies from A to Z. All right? For a Nigerian Owambe party, a lot of walking, swimming, and flying creatures have to die, okay, to make this party happen. My vegetarians are not happy, but I'm sorry. That's just the nature of an Owambe. It is there. What else is there? Tremendous fashion, lavish fashion, okay? Fashion to lavish extenses, colors to lavish extenses, hair ties, what we call geles, to lavish extenses, okay? Our fashion is not just fashion, it is a statement about who we are, and in some cases, a statement about where we are in society, right? Then what else is there? Money thrown from our wallets, from our hands, from all the way down to the floor. I have never been to one Owambe party that after people left the dance floor, there wasn't just random dollar bills or whatever lying on the floor. This is our culture, guys. It's our culture. You might think it a little ludicrous. It's our culture. We love to celebrate each other. Like if you go to a wedding and Couple getting married is dancing. You go to the couple getting married and you spray your money and throw the money at them. That is how we celebrate people. What else is there? Multiples of personalities, from an excited host to an angry host to a gate crasher, someone who wasn't invited to the party, trying to come to the party wearing the colors that were called for the party somehow. All kinds of personalities, all kinds of antics. It is all there in lavish extent. Okay. So I went to this Owambe party, okay, a couple years back. And again, I said I was around 27. Now, if you're going to an Owambe party, you don't wear a t-shirt and jeans. You dress up. You wear the cultural regalia. You tie the head tie called a gele, Gele. Look it up if you don't know about it. You wear the hair tie called a gele. And that gele has to even say something about you. And some women are very talented in wearing a gele. And if you're talented in tying a gele, you get dressed up in your house and you tie your gele from your house and you go to the party. I don't have the gele talents, okay? So I wore my outfits and I just took the fabric of my for my gele to the party because I knew that our host was graciously providing professional gele tires at the party. And literally, again, if you're not Nigerian, and if you go to a party and you see ladies, a Nigerian party, and you see ladies with a chair in the bathroom or in the hallways, wrapping fabrics around people's heads, those are the professional gele ties, okay? So I knew there was going to be those ladies there, and I just took the fabric with me, and I went to the party. And when I got to the party, there were two ladies. I went to the first one. She had a line of about 6, 7, 8 people. I was like, oh, no, I'm not waiting for this. Then I found out the second one had started, and I reasoned, okay, she's just started. Maybe not too many people. No, she's around, so let me go to her. I went to her, and she was in a bathroom. And by the time I got to her, I was the next person in line. Okay, so great. Aramide made a great decision. However, she was working on someone, right? Someone who was a member of the older generation, as I've defined it. She had also finished working on that person's friend. So essentially, these two ladies were the first she was working with. She'd finished one. Now she was working on the second one. And while she was working on the second one, her friend who had gotten her hair tied stayed with her to talk to her. And then I was next. Okay. I come in, I greet, say good evenings, all of that. And now I'm waiting for my gele to be tied, okay, by this professional hair tire. By the way, I should say this. The professional hair tire was someone who was clearly older than me, but still at an age, I would say maybe older millennial, someone I could still talk to. So I'm waiting to get my gele tied. And in the process of this woman in front of me getting her gele tied, she gets often, what's the word, discontent. Like I said, this gele is a statement piece of who you are and where you're at. The gele tire would tie her hair, and before she finished, like, no, I don't like this one. I don't like this one, you know? And then the gele tire would take it off and try again. No, I don't like this one. 20 degrees, 30 degrees. So all of this is going on, and I'm telling you the truth, guys. I stood there for at least, at that point in time, maybe almost 30 minutes, right? In my heels, just waiting patiently. And in my head, I'm thinking to myself, man, by now, the first gele tire that I left with all those ladies, she's probably through that line and I should have waited. But I just decided to keep waiting because this one is almost done. Now something happens, okay? Now these ladies, the two customers that have been served, they're members of the older generation. While all of this is going on, a third friend of theirs buzzes in, also a member of the older generation. And she makes a beeline right to her friend's chair, her friend who's getting her gele tied. And I see she doesn't have a gele on her head. So she wants her gele tied. Now, this is very clear to everyone in the room in this bathroom, but not a word is said. I also don't say anything. I'm just watching. They're communicating with each other. The third friend is now, participating in the antics. No, you should do it this way and this way. And this gele tire, this millennial gele tire is continuing to wrap and get to this point. But at some point, they do get to a point where this woman is finally satisfied with her gele. Now, as the gele tying is coming to a close for this woman who's seated and I've been waiting, this third friend that walked up is clearly trying to get her gele tied. She looks at her friends and they look at her. And right now, I know what they want to do is just take my spot and sit down and get their gele tied. I'm not saying anything. I'm literally at this point in time, I'm just watching and I'm asking myself, what's going to happen here? What's going to be done here? What's going to be said here, if anything? And I see that as the gele time is rounding up, these three friends, members of the older generation, they're looking at each other. They're making mental calculation. They're communicating with each other. We Nigerians, we do that. We can communicate with each other without saying a word, just facial expressions and body expressions, right? They're communicating with each other. And at some point, I can actually see in their face, they make the decision, just sit down. I'm a Dini, right? In relation to me, it's a child. What's she going to do? Just sit down and get your gele done. So immediately, very quick, swift move. The friend gets up, and this friend that buzzed in country just quickly sits down, and the millennial starts to work on her hair. And that's when I pipe up. And I said, excuse me, I have been waiting here for at least 30 minutes. I want to get my gele tied. And in that moment, the millennial kind of pauses, the gele tire, she pauses, she takes she removes the fabric from the lady's head. And the woman gets up, and I take a seat and I get my gele tied. That's the story. Now, I have told some members of the Nigerian society about this story, and I got different responses, right? Some people said to me that, no, you don't do that around me. That's disrespectful. Some people said, yeah. Some people, I even heard responses like, yeah, I wouldn't have done that because I have learned, I've been taught, you don't speak up to older people, and you actually don't speak up to them because they can curse you. Okay. Yeah, those are responses that I got. Some were like, I would have done something like that, and a lot, because of the way we've been raised, because of the cultural values we've been given, said, nah, Ramide, you missed that. Now, I'm going to explain and tell you a couple of things about why I spoke up. Like I said, as this lady buzzed in with the intention of cutting, chancing, as Nigerians will say, she buzzed in with the intention of cutting. And despite her friends knowing that I had been patient there while they were doing all of this, I don't know, hoopla to get it style right, I was patient because I wanted to see how they would treat the situation. I wanted to see how would these ladies, yes, they're older than me, but how would they treat this situation, knowing that what they're about to do is essentially cheat me, right? And the truth of the matter is, the reason I spoke up to say, excuse me, I have been waiting here, is because these ladies, as members of the older generation, as members of the older generation of Nigerians that are meant to be a standard of moral integrity, as I mentioned earlier, they lacked some basic decency to ask, hey, can we actually do this? You know what I mean? They just looked at me and they looked at each other and they discounted me in a sense like, she's a child, just sit down. And that for me, that was immoral behavior. It was wrong behavior. It was misbehavior. And I wasn't just going to sit and not talk because I'm supposed to be the young person who doesn't talk. That's one of the first reasons why I spoke up. I believe all elders, all people or elders should be given basic respect, not just elders. Everyone should be given basic respect and dignity for their humanity. I don't believe that it's always silence and deference at all costs, especially when the said elder is abusing the honor of being an elder. So I spoke up. And the funny thing about it is that if these ladies actually, whether they said it to me in a gentle way or whether they said it to me in Yoruba, like, hey, I'm sorry, but we know you've been standing here, but can our friends sit down? If they had the basic decency to do that, that's when I would have come back with, okay, I will respect my elders and I will let them have the spot, literally, even though I've been waiting, right? But just that behavior, that cheating behavior of chancing and thinking you can get away with it, nah, I wasn't going to have that. Here's another reason why I spoke up. You and I both know. Again, I think a lot in my mind. If I was a white woman, those three ladies would not have attempted what they had done. Some of you might think, no, I've actually seen members of the older generation mistreating and doing their thing, whether you're white or black. Cool. But I'm very sure on this. In most cases, if I was a white woman, these women would not have tried. In fact, if I was a white woman, the woman sitting on the chair saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, she would have hurried herself up just so a white woman can sit down and get her gele tied. And that for me is also a problem. Because the truth of the matter is, what does it say about a people if we, especially the people we are looking to be transmitters of moral behavior and transmitters of value from one generation to another, what do we have if those people are willing to transmit that value to someone else that's of another culture, but because you are of their culture, they're not willing to give you that value? What do we have? I think these are the things that we have to start questioning, especially as it relates to interaction with the older generation. Here's the other thing. This is another reason why I spoke up. When I said, excuse me, I've been waiting here, I wasn't even talking to those ladies. I was talking to the millennial. I was talking to her as a business owner, and I literally wanted her to look me in the eye. As a customer, she was going to allow to be abused in the name of traditional values, right? Listen, tying a gele at a party, it seems casual, but the truth is you are running a business, whether it's in a bathroom or in a hallway. You are providing a service. People are coming for your service and they are paying you for that service. They are your customers. Are you going to allow customer abuse in the name of traditional values? Are you going to let misbehaving elders force you to run your business like a tribal person? And guys, you might be listening to me and thinking, man, Ramide, that's too much, man. You've taken it way out of bounds, but it's really the truth. Personally, when I see someone who is running a business, someone of our culture who is running a business in a way that they have preference for one group of it over another because of traditional mindsets or cultural mindsets. I have preference for the older generation, so I will serve them first. I have preference for the older generation, so I will let them mistreat my other customers that are younger. Literally, when I see that in someone, I see someone who doesn't understand the value and power of what they have in their hands, right? Like I said, running a business, it is a vehicle to build wealth. It's also a vehicle to serve people. And if you're going to serve one group better than another because of cultural mindsets that elders are passing on and are trying to force you to abide by, I think you're building something that's not going to last. Let's play this thing out a little bit, okay? Just right. We're talking business, a gele tying business. Let's play it out a little. Imagine this gele tying business is like a hotcake city. And this woman, this millennial woman, is running this business like a tribal business, right? Let's call her Gloria. I don't know any gele tire called Gloria, so I'm not speaking about any specific person. I need to share that. I need to say that. But let's call her Gloria. And she's running her gele tying business like a tribal business, right? She'll tie the gele. She'll allow anyone to come and sit down and take all the time, 45 minutes. I don't like this. I don't like that. 20 degrees, 30 degrees, 40 degrees, right? She'll allow the older people to cut the younger people. The truth is, what happens to Gloria in overtime while she's doing that is that other people are paying attention to this hotcake gele tying business, right? Someone else is watching. Let's call this someone else Samantha. Samantha's watching and she's seeing this gele tying business as a hotcake business. She's also watching as people come out of Gloria's chair like, how you tie it? I'll say, all right, those are the styles. I see. Now, what Samantha does is I'm running into this business. She's going to go ahead and run into this gele tying business. And instead of running it the way Gloria, like she brings the same ingenuity, the same hardworking hustle mentality that Gloria brings. But what she leaves off the table is those traditional cultural mindset, right? For example, letting an elder mistreat another customer because that customer is younger. She leaves that off the table. What happens over time is that people try to see that, oh, Samantha's doing this gele time business too. And oh, by the way, we get better respect from Samantha. Samantha has really, really created a service that everyone is treated as an equal. I like her service. And by the way, Samantha also doesn't just allow anyone to come sit and spend 45 minutes. No, Samantha puts that service in 15 minutes. And she puts pictures of styles in front of her customers. And her customers just simply point at the style they want. And maybe they point at the style and they modify it a little bit. But Samantha's got them in that 15 minutes. Okay, I'll go to Samantha. Right? That's what starts to happen. I'm playing things out a little bit, obviously, but that's what starts to happen when we are starting to build things and we're working with different members of the generation and we're allowing some values of the older generation, some values that I gotta be honest, there's some things that don't serve us well. Or Maybe they serve us well in some context, but in other contexts, we literally have to re-say some. There's some things that don't serve us well. And if we, now I'm talking to millennial Nigerians and Gen Z and whoever else, there's so much in our culture that is so valuable for the world. Our food can turn into businesses. Our weddings can turn into businesses. Our gele tying, our fashion can turn into businesses that last generations if we do it well. But I do think for us, we do need to re-question the way we bring in our culture to things. The way we need to re-question, review the way we uphold our culture and things. And I gotta be honest with you too, guys. All the things I'm saying, it sounds like, why are you talking about this, Aramide? This is pretty straightforward, but truly it's not, right? It's not. Old ways die hard. For that millennial who was going to go ahead and tie gele of a customer that had really just disrespected another customer and quietly keep doing it because, well, this customer is older. That's an example of old ways dying hard. And I do think for us who are millennials in this 2024 world looking ahead and beyond, we have to review and question, audit some things, and in some cases even reject some things or put it on hold. Because if we want to build something that lasts, we need to modify ourselves for the future. I want to change topics a little bit. Yesterday, I was preparing for this recording and I remembered some of my experiences as it relates to the generations. I said earlier that I do feel that I'm privileged when it comes to my relationship with older generation Nigerians. The older generation of Nigerians that I have pressed into are people that really have given me gold. At the same time, I have been in more than one occasion, I have been the person who has had to stand beside and hold the hand of someone who, according to our culture, did obey and follow and respect a member of the older generation, and found that their obedience and their respect only led them into a dungeon. Found that their obedience and respect only led them into a pained place in their lives. I've been on more occasions than one the person who is holding the hands of that person. While I will tell you I'm someone who respects the elders and I do think they should be venerated, that experience of being someone who's had to stand beside someone who's has to pick up the pieces of their lives bit by bit, or one aspect of their lives bit by bit, on account of the fact that they followed an elder, they trusted a member of the older generation, whether it was in family, whether it was in church. This happens a lot in churches with Nigerians, whether it happens in a business. I respect you, older generation, but as someone who has had to watch the painful work a person has to do to pick up themselves, to pick up their self-esteem, to change their mindsets after being stuck in this time warp with some elders. Some elders are just, I'm sorry, but you're not doing your work. Or maybe it's that you're doing your work, but as you're doing your work, you're releasing poisons to people that follow you. That is a very harsh statement. I say that, and it comes off harshly because I've seen the disruption of people's self-esteem when they followed an elder that led them to a dungeon. I have seen the lack of safety some members of my generation feel in certain contexts where they trusted elders that failed them. And I don't want to get preachy here, but there is a part of the Bible that talks about the murder between Cain and Abel. And it says that the blood of Abel still speaks against that work. The blood of Abel is from the ground. The spilled blood is still speaking. And essentially what that blood is doing is making an accusation against Cain, the murderer. I would dare to say that for those of the younger generation that have trusted some parts of themselves to the older generation, only for them to find themselves broken, hurt, abused, oppressed, My word to the older generation in that sense is that the blood of these people, metaphorically, life may be happening now. You might be getting the traditional respects now. That you're old as a member of the older generation, but the blood of these people that your actions, whether purposefully or unpurposefully, have maligned, it speaks out against you. Make amends is all I can say. Make amends. If you are in a family and you know that your actions have abused younger family members, your actions as the elder have abused younger family members in such a way that their lives have not recovered. I know people like that. We Nigerians, we love to laugh and we love to not dare say things to elders, but I know that there are people in my generation, they're suffering things because of the older generation, members of the older generation that they trusted. You need to make amends. That Nigerian ego and Nigerian pride that makes one refuse to reduce themselves to what they feel is beneath them, whether it's in status or in years. It's not serving you. You need to make amends. That's all I want to say. You need to make amends. And for those who have felt, for those of my generation or even younger, Gen Z or younger that have felt, I trusted these members of the older generations, and they broke me. I trusted them based on my culture, and my trust was taken for granted, and my interactions with them actually broke me down. I want to just say to you, as someone who is privileged in this topic, I want to encourage you not to give up on the older generation. I want to encourage you not to completely turn off the members of the older generation. I'm actually remembering right now one younger person that I asked, "Hey, what do you think about the older generation?" And that person just responded in one sentence, "I don't give a damn about the older generation." I think that response is legitimate. But I want to ask you, as someone who is privileged in this topic, not to turn yourself off from the older generation. You still need them. There are truly some things that they see that you can't, simply because your years have not reached where their years are. When a member of the older generation speaks, they're speaking from both the things they've done well, and the things they didn't do so well. Sometimes you're richer from someone else's rights than you are from their riches, and you need that in your life. And if you're someone who's younger and you have trusted a member of the older generation in Nigerian society, in Nigerian culture, someone else with a Nigerian influenced identity or whatever, however you want to call it, and that it has broken you. First, do whatever you need to heal, whether it's therapy or prayer or changing environment. Gosh, how important that is sometimes. Changing environments and just getting away. But still, find safe members of the older generation that you can press into. And if you're not finding it in the Nigerian community, guys, look outside. I know people who are doing that. They found mentors who are white and Puerto Rican and Filipino, but they look at the fruit of those people's lives and they say, I want that. If you're not finding a safe person in the Nigerian community that you can press into, look outside and read their books. Read their books, read the things they're saying. I guess I also wanted to say this. I'm looking at the time and we've been an hour into this conversation and we've only really peeled one layer. And this layer seems to be a layer that is hard towards the older generation. And if you're a member of the older generation, I apologize for that. I know that there are members of the older generation that are still pouring. They're writing books, they're starting businesses, and they're looking for young people to build with. They're looking for the young, safe people, young, bright people to build with. I know you're there, and I'm going to create an episode for you all. But permit me here to speak to members of my generation to say, if there's hurt in this topic, don't quit on the older generation. Find them. Find the ones that are safe. Find the ones that are doing things that amuse you, and find ways to serve them. Find ways to be around them. Sometimes you don't even need them to talk to you. You just need to see the way they operate. Find those ones and put yourself in front of them. All right. Thank you for listening to Dear Nigerians, and we'll see you on another episode. Bye.